It's easy to forget. This is a killing machine. It was designed to actually kill people. The copper or bronze blade is actually lashed to the handle with leather thonging. Now, it may seem a very flimsy way of securing it, but the leather is put on when it's still untreated, and it shrinks and tightens, and that's a really secure fixing. That means that soldiers can do their own maintenance. If they have a damaged handle, they can replace the handle and do it themselves. You don't need a big military workshop there. This long haft of the axe, it gives it a longer swing when you're using it, and this flared shape at the end, again, that's not just nice design, it's to stop the axe falling out of your hand when you're using it if you're hot and sweaty.
But how powerful was the penetrative axe when used against an ancient helmet?
Definitely a better strike than the mace. Almost managed to cleave the helmet. Right through inside, probably a fractured skull. Not a happy bunny.
Did soldiers use body armor in battles? Because of the intense heat, most of the body was exposed to the force of bows and blades. Only occasionally were charioteers shown wearing leather bands around their bodies. However, the pharaoh had to be protected in battle. On this ornate chest, Tutankhamun is depicted wearing body armor. Ramses II would also go into battle wearing leather body armor. Yet the Hittites were more advanced, having developed flexible metal armor.
This is a replica, this is a reconstruction which was done a few years ago. Each piece is overlapping half of the other one. By making them overlap each other, you get a closed armor, but that is also flexible. If an arrow hits this straight, it can't get through. And even if it hits from the side, it gets stuck between these plates. This one is made for humans, to prevent humans from getting hurt, but there are larger ones which were obviously used for horses.
The infantry relied upon their shields as their protection, using a centuries-old design. These Egyptian shields show the construction, using wood covered with leopard hide. Those used on the battlefield would have been similar in design, but less extravagant.
This is a replica of an ancient Egyptian shield. Again, the original dates to the period of the New Kingdom. It's made of wood overlaid with leather. And you can see by the size, it's superbly designed to actually protect the upper part of your body. The shield is big enough to shield me and maybe one other person from incoming arrows or from spears or blows from axes. It's also large enough to kneel behind. Imagine facing the incoming Egyptian infantry. They have a wall of shields like this. They will be impenetrable to your arrows, and when you're at close quarters, to your swords and battle axes.
Ramses II demanded the best weapon technology available for his troops, but he was up against great competition. Weapons such as the khopesh were particularly deadly. Its curved shape derived originally from a farming sickle used to cut crops. Although it had humble origins, the khopesh was in fact an extremely effective and versatile weapon, with the cutting edge on the outside of the curve.
This is a straight-edged sword, probably been brought in by mercenaries, based on a Greek design, really. The Romans also used swords similar to this, and they were used throughout Europe. Their skill was far superior to ours in a lot of respects, and we have definitely lost some of the technology, and we're actually now rediscovering it.
These 3,000-year-old swords are the type to have been favored by Ramses II. They're called European straight swords and are tapered to a point with the center of gravity at the back. Extremely lightweight, they could be used by the average infantryman for fencing. Their slashing power made them a deadly weapon.
The Hittites and other enemies of the Egyptians favoured a straight sword. It's a good thrusting sword, but in open combat it can still be used to slash, so it still has a cutting capacity. It's a dual-purpose weapon. The Egyptians favoured the khopesh. It has this curved blade, and the thing about curved blades is, as they lay on the flesh, they naturally impart a slicing motion. They're technically more efficient at the cut. I've looked at these on the wall carvings for years and always thought they were rather primitive, like a sickle. They've just picked up an agricultural tool. It was a primitive, ungainly, ugly weapon. But this fine reproduction tells me it's a really beautifully designed weapon. In fact, it's almost perfectly designed because it has every function. I can still thrust with it because the curve is so created that the thrusting point is a direct line from my shoulder. And it's also got this little hook, so I can get in, I can hook an enemy's shield, bring it down and jab him in the face. And if that hasn't done it, slash open his jaw. I think this would be my weapon of choice.
Ramses II knew he had to have the best swords and developed a range to include the short straight sword and the longer Egyptian blades. These formed a major component in the Egyptian infantry arsenal. But there was another even more highly prized and technologically advanced weapon in the ancient arms race: the lethal composite bow. In the 12th century BC, Ramses II was building up a powerful fighting force to protect Egypt and conquer new lands. To achieve this, he needed the most advanced weaponry available. One of the most highly developed weapons was the composite bow. Stored away in the Cairo Museum is a unique set. These amazing weapons are 3,000 years old and have been magnificently engineered. Bows and arrows had been used for centuries by the Egyptians, but invading enemies like the Hyksos brought new technology.
You have the Hyksos coming in with their compound bows, confronting the Egyptians. They can stand off out of range of the Egyptians and shoot them to pieces with compound bows. And the only solution the Egyptians have to that is to get the compound bow themselves.
The Egyptians first used simple bows between 3 and 6 feet in length. These were later surpassed by the more powerful composite bow, constructed to achieve the greatest possible range while retaining a manageable size and weight.
Inside here is an extremely sophisticated piece of engineering.
The body of the bow is created using thin strips of buffalo horn, which keep their shape and act as a powerful spring during firing. The horn was then attached to a preformed piece of wood with resin and left to set for a month.
Once that's set, then the string comes off, and that's a bonded unit. Your horn's there. You've got a powerful spring, but there's so much energy locked up in there that it will explode on release and could break.
Animal sinew was used to bind the bow together. Beaten until fibrous, it was bound around the main body for greater penetration.
These are incredibly strong fibers that resist tension. And eventually, it's going to look something like this. And this is then layered on the composite of wood and horn, and it gives strength and protection to the whole structure.
All the elements of the bow were held together using a resin glue derived from fish, but this took a very long time to set.
This is going to take something like 18 months to 2 years before it sets to the right and stable consistency. So making a composite bow was a very highly developed technology, but it was an incredibly expensive technology.
Today's equivalent composite materials are fiberglass and carbon fiber.
It's the same thing. Horn is essentially carbon. So when that's laminated with fiberglass, these are the materials that we go to space in and the other gizmos of our modern day society. But the concept of composite structure giving extreme strength is as old as the Egyptians.
With a composite bow, you don't need to restring it just before the battle. You can actually carry the bow around ready strung for quite long periods. So the composite bow was a big leap ahead from that point of view and was absolutely essential to the new Egyptian armies of the New Kingdom.
This was a really ingenious piece of technology. If you look at it in its unstrung shape, you will see how the composite materials, the horn, the sinew, and the wood, have been set for a preformed shape. So you can see these limbs are already set as a spring, so that when I string it, you've already loaded the spring in its state of rest. These limbs are already straining forward, and you get this wonderful shape that we see on all the wall carvings. And then when I pull it, it changes shape yet again and metamorphosizes into this wonderful crescent arc, full of power.
Taking 18 months to complete, the composite bow was considered a precious and revered weapon. These extremely ornate bows were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun and are some of the finest examples ever discovered. The composite bow was the most powerful ancient bow to exist. Its design was developed over thousands of years until it was perfect. But just how powerful was it?
This is a bow of the Mongolian type. It's a horse archer's bow, designed to be used from horseback. These that you see here are seers, and they're held to the bow by the knee, and they extend extra energy to the bow once it's drawn back. They give you a virtually unlimited draw right back across the chest, and that's when the bow really starts working. That's when the seers impart the energy to the bow. This is a modern composite. It's a copy, and it's made with modern materials, which are quite good, but not as good as the original materials. They were made by craftsmen. They were very, very, very potent. I would say you're probably looking at something twice as powerful as what we use now.
The speed of the arrow leaving the bow is incredibly fast. Only when we film at high speed and slow down the image can we see how effective and highly engineered this weapon really is.
Action!
Yeah, you can already see the sears there, the slight sears starting to come in. Once the arrow is released, it actually bends around the bow to allow it to carry on straight. And then what it does is what we call fishtail, from side to side until it straightens up. And you'd probably be looking at probably close to 300 feet per second for an arrow.
300 feet per second. That's over 200 miles per hour. The impact from such a weapon would be fatal. Ramses II had amassed a powerful arsenal of weaponry to challenge the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh. There was one more weapon which would be crucial in the outcome: the lightning-fast super chariot. Chariots became the most important piece of military equipment that a superpower could possess.
Chariots evolved over time from what was initially quite a clumsy cart with solid wheels and so on, into eventually the ultimate war machine, very lightly built, very efficient. It was probably the most complex object that anybody in the ancient world ever attempted to construct.
The warrior pharaohs of Egypt came into conflict with enemies who used fleets of chariots in battle, but only built up their own chariot corps through trade and seizure. Once they'd mastered the art of chariot building, the Egyptians developed their own vast fleets. Images on tombs show mass production of chariots being manufactured for battle.
This was clearly a unique moment in history when, for the first time, the entire resources of a state were deployed to producing a chariot on what was essentially the first production line in history.
Recent discoveries that were made at the site of Ramses' capital at Ramesses in the Delta have actually revealed a military-industrial complex, complete with workshops for manufacturing various types of weaponry, and even essentially a store house for chariots and parts of chariots.
By the time of Ramses II, the Egyptians had not only adopted the chariot, they'd almost perfected it, fine-tuning it into the most superb machine of the ancient world.
The Egyptian craftsmen took the chariots, and they're technically incredibly difficult things to make. The wheels, masterpieces of construction, but they made a light, fast chariot which was better than the enemy's chariots.
Chariot expert Robert Herford has built replicas of both Egyptian and Hittite chariots.
It's a light